She's helping me run today's event. She's my master slide clicker. She has the power. So if I go on too much, she might shut me up and turn the presentation off. But just moving on to welcome, a bit of housekeeping. Yeah, I just want to welcome everyone to today's event. I'm here wearing two hats today, as CIPR Midlands Vice Chair and also with my spotty dog hat on. Supporting people to get into PR is a real motivator for me, and at Spotty Dog we throw our doors open every few months really to give people a taste of what it's like to work in PR. So we do this as a regular thing, but today the focus of our open house is celebrating the diversity of our profession and recognising the different roles from in-house consultancy, agency and specialist practice areas, you know, whether that's internal comms, stakeholder, public affairs, and the diversity of the backgrounds that people that come into our industry come from. I think personally, from my own perspective, the industry can sometimes seem quite dominated as sort of white middle-class women, speaking as a white middle-class woman. And actually, we have an incredible range of people that work in our background and work across the sector. And it's about making sure we're putting the spotlight and not shining in one area. And that's really, really important because we need to represent the society that we're part of. So at Spotty Dog, when we started planning this latest open house event back in June, it came on the back of Blackout Tuesday and also the release of the CIPR Race and PR report. And we were really shocked and really sad to understand the level of unconscious bias that really dominates society and within our own PR industry. And I read the report and I was really sort of, what was really quite interesting was in June, it was around Father's Day. And I read a comment talking about how when somebody from a BAME background was going in to buy a card for Father's Day, there was not a single black face on the range of cards that they could buy. And of course, as someone going to a card shop and seeing, you know, lots of white skinned father figures, you know, I've never had that problem. And I think that's the challenge that we face, that we all might think that we don't have an unconscious bias and life is rosy, but that's because we don't stand in the shoes that other people do. So I think although you know, it's been a difficult period when there's lots of discussion about the subject, actually it's really, really important everyone stops and thinks. And at Spotty Dog we really want to play our part, and the team were kind of quite active that we should support Blackout Tuesday and we should do our own thing. But I was really passionate that we can't just, you know, make a statement without doing something about it. So that's why we reached out to the Taylor Bennett Foundation. I'm really grateful Panelists could join us today, because it was really important that we did want to help and do the right thing, but actually sometimes the arrogance that we think we know better and what it's like to stand in other people's shoes without asking people, you know, that's part of the problem. So we reached out to the Taylor Bennett Foundation. Melissa was really brilliant talking about all the opportunities that we can do to support and help tackle this issue. And so today is about getting started on Spotty Dog's personal commitment to raise awareness of what PR practitioners can do right now to be more inclusive, as well as signpost Bain talents and Taylor Bennett, and also be inspired by other practitioners today, such as Natasha and Nicole, who joined us. But we also thought to bring best attention to this issue rather than it just being a Spotty Dog event. It's really great to elevate it to a CIPR Midlands event because that broadens the reach. So thank you very much to Amy. She's helped loads to help make this happen. And yeah, I just wanted to, before we hear from our first panelist, I think Melissa's going to kick off in a minute and I'll introduce everyone in a second. I just really wanted to reflect on the race and PR reports. And also just to cover off the housekeeping, I think we've switched everyone on to mute. If you've got any questions, fire it up in the Q&A box. We'll have Q&A questions at the end. And as I said before, you know, keep the conversation going. Use the hashtag, share your thoughts. Really interested in, you know, kind of what people's own opinions are. But I'm just going to move quickly on to the CIPR Race and PR report. If you haven't read it, it was released on the 18th of June. There was some qualitative research undertaken in 2019, interviewing some BAME practitioners. So the release of the report came at a really interesting time. It was hot on the heels of Blackout Tuesday, and, you know, where awareness of, you know, kind of the challenges that BAME people face was really out there. But the good news is that the CIPR was already conscious of this issue last year and work had already started. The report was quite shocking. It found that the diversity of the PR industry had actually declined from 18% of the community being represented in 2015 to dropping to 8% of practitioners identifying as BAME. So that was a real wake-up moment that, you know, we've been talking about this issue for a long time. Google started a massive issue in 2015 around Bain 2020. There was a big plan, so what can we do more? And we've gone backwards. So that's kind of pretty shocking. And when you read the report, there's some really terrible stuff that people face that many of us just wouldn't be aware of. However, it's not all bad news. It was really heartening that 94% of those interviewed recommended a career in PR to Bain graduates. So that's one of the reasons we've organised today's event, because as an industry, we need to work on inclusivity from the inside, but also keep banging the drum and showing a diverse range of people who work in our industry. So it's great to be joined by some young practitioners today. It's great to be joined by some more experienced people as well, because there's something for everybody. The report identified 4 common themes of concern and issues we have to tackle. So racism and microaggressions. So lots of people are aware of blatant stuff that goes out and shouldn't happen, but often I think some of the feedback from the report was that some things happen sort of that are kind of happen under the radar, and if you aren't kind of aware of the issues, you wouldn't even notice it. But people are facing, you know, difficult stuff all the time. Inflexibility in a non-inclusive culture, lack of equal opportunities, and then unconscious bias. These are the kind of 4 kind of features. And the report did recognise that this isn't just a challenge for the BAME community. Actually, anybody that's not part of the mainstream of society, that isn't part of a huge representative group, that, you know, there's also challenges. And for my part, I really strongly believe that our industry it still has a big issue with social mobility, because I think that a lot of people that come into the industry after, you know, it's through the network or having a work experience placement and stuff like that. So, you know, if we can't help people from tougher backgrounds get into the industry, that cycle will never be broken. So, you know, we've got a lot of challenges. It's not just in relation to you know, one area of unconscious bias. We've got lots of areas. So being inclusive and welcoming everybody from every background is really important. And actually, one of the reasons why when I look at speakers today, I didn't want to just focus on, you know, a set of speakers from one background. I wanted to have, you know, lots of different voices. So do read the report. It's free on the CIPR website. Tweet me and I'll send you the link. But just moving on to the next kind of slide, it's just really talking about how we can drive change. And I just recommend, you know, as I say, take time to read the report, because as well as flagging up the issues, the report offers solutions and signposts how you can take action, and we can all play a part. Firstly, there's a new standard. It's called the Blueprint Commitment, and the report outlines what's involved with that. But it's really about raising the bar in relation to recruitment, talent development, and culture of PR employers. Initially created for agencies just because it's much easier for agencies to deploy, whereas large employers, you know, if you're kind of public sector or whatever, there's lots of machinery that influence HR policies. But it's hoped that the Blueprint Commitment would be expanded to in-house PR employers. And it's about recognising that or giving recognition that the employer has a fair and unbiased recruitment process and transparent progression policies. And again, that's not just in relation to race, it's in relation to being reflective and inclusive of all people that make up an organisation. Second thing we can all do is to get involved with the work of Taylor Bennett Foundation. I'm not going to steal Melissa's thunder. She's going to tell you all about Taylor Bennett in a second and what we can do to help. Third thing the report talks about is the Bain 2020 initiative. It was launched in 2016 in collaboration with Google, and it was a real simple commitment to inspire action to achieve 20% of talent coming into the industry to either be from a Bain background or in terms of entering the industry or getting into the position of taking the leadership role. Obviously, we're a long way off that mark, so which is why events like today are really, really important, so we all know what we can do to kind of achieve that. The CIPR has done a cracking job with the diversity and inclusion panel. It's chaired by Avril Lee, who's a pretty well-known person within our industry. It's driven by CIPR volunteers. I know Avril would welcome anybody who wants to get involved, who shares the mission of improving inclusion. And as I say, it's not just about ethnicity, it's gender, sexuality, socioeconomic backgrounds, disability, faith, age. We want to broaden the range of practitioners that represent the PR community, so that we represent the society we live in. So the CIPR Diversity and Inclusion Panel have done a cracking job. They got the Race and PR report together in the first place. They've been pretty busy since June. They released the report. There was loads of media comms around it. They hosted a remote event. They are partnering up with various CIPR regional and national groups. So they've done an event in Scotland. They've formed an NHS BAME communicators network. So anybody that works for the NHS, that's worth sharing amongst your community. They're doing stuff with the international group. They've partnered up with WAM, which is a respected network for women in healthcare. So they've been really banging the drum. And also, I know I sit on the CIPR board. There's another board director called Avita Patel, and she's set up a mentoring group called A Leader Like Me. And this is really to shine the spotlight on leaders from a diverse range of backgrounds so that they can inspire other people. Because when you look in PR Week and when you look at industry communications and you don't see the diversity of faces, it can be pretty uninspiring. So it's really important for people to know that there's people out there. Sometimes they're hidden away, but there's some great people out there doing great work. So that's what A Leader Like Me is trying to really kind of shout about. So it's clear there's a lot going on for me, and for me it's really important. It's about, you know, this conversation is part of mainstream and everyday business rather than having a specialist group that meets to talk about the, you know, issues. We're all responsible for tackling this, the challenges we have in our industry. So that just sets the context for how today's event came to be. And I just want to introduce our panelists. So as mentioned, really grateful that Melissa can join us today as CEO of Taylor Bennett Foundation, and she'll talk about the work Taylor Bennett have been doing for over 12 years in a second. Also delighted to join be joined by Nicole Taylor. If you were here right at the start of the webinar when we were all just signing up, we were joking a little bit because Nicole's been a really great CIPR ambassador for a number of years. She served on the committee, and Nicole's worked in some really interesting roles. So I thought that might be of interest to people, really looking at how you develop your PR career. And Nicole has worked in several different roles and moved backwards, forwards, and up. So she'll tell you all about her background. Natasha Hughes joined us, is a brilliant ambassador for Taylor Bennett. She was one of the Taylor Bennett alumni and has done some really interesting things. She'll introduce herself, I'm sure, but she's just moved from a really exciting role in Brussels back to the Midlands where her family are. So Brussels loss is definitely the Midlands game, Natasha, so thank you for joining us. And then I'm really excited to introduce Charlotte from Spotty Dog. She joined us just a few months ago, and she's at the start of her PR career, and she's amazing. So I just thought, if we've got some younger people out there who are just looking to graduate or start to make career choices, Charlotte's a really good contact and a really good role model to talk about how she's taken her first steps in the industry. So they're your panelists today. If you've got any questions, just post them up on the Q&A box, and I'll field them at the end. And so, yeah, so I guess I'll pass over to Melissa then.
Thank you. Yeah, good. It's always that thing, am I being heard or not? Are you happy for me to just do my little spiel, or would you like to do just introductions with everyone briefly first?
No, over to you, Melissa, and then everyone can just talk about their background as we move on. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So my name is Melissa Lawrence, and I am the Chief Executive of the Taylor Bennett Foundation. So during this short time that we've got, I will just cover a little bit about my background, the foundation, why the foundation was set up, and essentially why we still continue to do what we do. So as I said, I am the Chief Exec of Taylor Bennett Foundation. I'm going to refer to it as TBF or the Foundation, because I know obviously that can be a bit of a mouthful. And I've been in post for just over a year and a half now. So I've always worked in the charity sector. I have a very strong interest in education and talent development programs. I've always worked to support businesses within the financial, professional and related services sector. I don't have a PR or comms background at all. So when I started working in this industry, let's just say it's been a steep learning curve, but enjoyable. I'm going to throw that out there. I'm definitely learning new things every day, but it's definitely interesting. I've always worked with businesses to help them increase diversity and social mobility. Those are the particular areas of interest to me. So although as well, you know, I'll talk about the foundation in a second, although we focus on ethnic diversity and gender in particular, social mobility is also something we look at, and it's now starting to creep into our work. So in terms of why the foundation was set up, we were set up by Taylor Bennett. So Taylor Bennett are our founders. They set us up in 2008. They are an executive search firm, and essentially they set up the foundation to address the need for greater ethnic diversity within PR and comms. We do two main things. So we introduce and encourage candidates from a Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds, so BAME backgrounds, to sort of consider a career in communications, and we work with employers to basically try to support them with diversifying their workforce. And you know, as I said earlier on, it's been interesting, my 18 or so months here. There are some people doing some really great work, but there is still, as I said, plenty to be done. And our programs are basically all designed to create a pipeline of talent into the industry. So there are three core programs that the foundation runs. The first is our PR training program. It's a thing that we have always done from the very beginning. It's our flagship program. And basically the training program is designed to equip candidates with the skills, knowledge and experiences to kickstart a career in the industry. And I will say that we are pretty successful at doing that, albeit on a small scale, and I'll talk about that in a second. But generally 97% of the graduates that go through the training program start a career in comms, whether it's full-time or on a fixed-term contract. And the program is always sponsored by an agency. So at the moment our agencies are Brunswick, Finsbury and FTI. And over the 10 weeks, the trainees will, you know, spend a day with their sponsoring agency. They will have media training sessions. They have time with an English tutor. The foundation is covering employability skills training with them. So as I said, the idea is that once they start looking for jobs, they will understand how to navigate and understand the process, or the tricky process of finding employment in PR, in the PR sector. We work with the PRCA and the CIPR, and they provide our trainees with training sessions in kind, which is fantastic. And I guess the biggest part of the training program is the masterclasses that are part of that. So over the 10 weeks for the 6 graduates, we will facilitate between 20 and 30 different masterclasses that will cover as many different sectors and disciplines that we can think of. So, you know, they'll visit agencies, and this was pre-COVID-19, by the way, but they will visit agencies or in-house comms teams. For the rest of the year, we are still doing that, but it's all being done in a remote format. Our other program is an internship program, and that's essentially where the foundation facilitates a minimum 4-week paid internship up to 12 months, depending on an agency's capacity and a young person's as well. And before everyone goes out on their internship, we will facilitate a 3-day boot camp, which basically is designed to provide an insight into the industry. So there are some introductory sessions around, you know, the history of communications and introduction to PR, and then there are some advanced sessions as well. This year, our program has not run as we would like. As you can imagine, internships are best delivered in an office, in person, but we have been able to facilitate a number of virtual internships. And although they are not equal to an office-based internship, they have actually still been very, very good. The feedback from employers and from the candidates has been positive. I think particularly for our employers, there's a lot of overcompensating to try to, you know, get a young person immersed in their business and trying to help them really understand the culture of their organisation. So it's been different, but it's still been effective, and we're quite pleased about that. And our internship program is for young people who are post-18. You don't need a degree to take part in the internship program. I just want to flag for our training program, you do need to be a graduate. It's a graduate training program. And it's the only program also that we have where you need a minimum academic criteria. And then our final program is a mentoring program, and we have been doing this for around 4 years now. And it's a 6-month mentoring program, again, for young people who are post-18, all the way up to generally our alumni who have been working 2 to 3 years. And we match the mentees with PR practitioners in the industry. And our mentoring program mentors can be account manager, account exec level, all the way up to director, partner, and CEOs of agencies. So there's a real breadth of experience of people that take part in that program. We are going to obviously talk a little bit about you know, some of the challenges of the industry. I think lots of companies will talk about diversity at that sort of junior and entry level, very well sewn up, but we have noticed over the last couple of years, and probably longer actually, that retention and progression is a big issue. So one of the things for the foundation is to develop, we're nearly there with developing a new program. It will be like an accelerator program, which will be coupled with mentoring and leadership training, and our mentors will be director level upwards. So really excited about that program. And then the way that employers support us, last year we worked with over 130 different companies, agencies, in-house comms teams, and individuals. And basically they support us by taking part in our programs, hosting masterclasses, and using our job advertising service. I think I mentioned earlier on that 97% of the grads that go for our programs do go straight into employment, and last year 100% went straight into employment. We did a survey in 2018 which revealed that 62% of our grads were still working within communications. So I'm sort of throwing that stat out because earlier on you were talking about the racing PR report, and although, you know, it makes for uncomfortable reading, there are some negative stories, there are equally some good stories, and our alumni who are here on the whole still enjoy working here. You know, they value, you know, the opportunities that they have. So for us, that's very positive. So why do we continue to do what we do? I mean, essentially, there is still a need for us. I was looking at the CIPR's diversity monitoring stats. It goes way back to 2008. And in 2008, it was the BAME population sat at 6.3%. And this year we saw that it sits at 9%. That's not a lot. You know, the fact that only 9% of the industry is from a BAME background is quite poor. And I think that there are a number of reasons for that. I think young people are still not considering a career in PR for different reasons. Some have not ever really considered a career in the industry. They don't necessarily always see it as a professional career. I think there's a real lack of understanding about the roles, the opportunities, networking. Having those professional networks seems to be a barrier as well. There's a lack of role models. And I know that a lot of our candidates, when they go into offices, and again, this was obviously pre-COVID-19, fingers crossed we go back to it next year, but when they walk into offices and they don't see anyone like themselves, it's not very aspirational. So that's why there's still a need for the foundation. That's why we continue to do what we do. And sometimes I'm asked, and this is to just finish up, why we should care about diversity. So I think, you know, there are a number of reports, McKinsey, CIPR, the PRCA, there are a lot that will say, you know, that diversity is good for business. You know, it is a business imperative. But for me, it is more than that. I think it's a moral one too. I think that the industry workforce needs to be reflective of the clients that we serve. And if it's lacking, how can you then get across, you know, the message that you want? And I think a diverse workforce provides different worldviews, thoughts, opinions, and I think it definitely gives businesses a competitive edge. And then particularly for our candidate network, we know that we make a genuine impact to their lives. So for me, those are all the reasons why we should care about diversity, not just for business. And that's it from me.
Thanks, Melissa. That's great. If anyone's got any questions for Melissa, obviously post them up. Look forward to some questions from the audience later. So moving on to Nicole, I gave a little bit of an overview before, but I think Nicole could probably introduce herself much better than I. So over to you, Nicole, to share your background and thought.
Thank you, Rachel. So yes, my name's Nicole Taylor. I'm currently Marketing Communications Manager at McKesson UK. For those that don't know who McKesson is, it's a US healthcare pharmaceutical brand who sort of acquired Celicio UK a few years ago. And within that company is the most popular or well-known brand would be Lloyd's Pharmacy, which is predominantly where my sort of work sits. So I look after all of the marketing communications for Lloyd's Pharmacy brand. As Rachel kind of alluded to, my role has changed a number of times over the last few years. So I've been with McKesson for 7.5 years roughly, and I've had about 5 different roles in that time. Everything from PR exec when I first started there, moving on to consumer PR manager, then I went into a content manager role, then I took on PR and content, and then most recently marketing communications manager, and I'm about to sort of change my role slightly again in the next few weeks as a senior brand and external manager. So I've had quite diverse roles within the remit that I've got at the moment. I look after all of our above the line marketing campaigns. I look after in-store marketing, so point of sale and kind of communications in stores, Lloyd's Pharmacy stores that is. And I also do our consumer and B2B PR and comms, as well as social media and content as well. So quite a broad remit at the moment. I guess in terms of what brought me into PR, I studied marketing, advertising and PR course at what was BCU. Is it still BCU? It was UCE at the time. That's how I'm showing my age now, which is now BCU. And as the title sort of says, it was broad marketing. It was a lot of kind of advertising, broader marketing channels with some PR. And I guess I really took a shine to the tutor of PR at the time, Kathleen Donnelly. She was very passionate about PR and comms and kind of really sold it to me really in terms of what it was all about and the benefits of it. And at the time, it wasn't as shiny, I guess, as some people might think as TV advertising and some of these other things. But I had a real interest in the writing side of it. The fact that you'd be kind of talking to people, i.e. journalists, and communicating with people, building contacts, kind of appealed to me and my skill set. I like to talk. That seemed to work well with kind of my personality as well as what I thought I was kind of skilled in. So I then went on to do a work experience placement at Heart of England Foundation Trust in my last year. And I went for an interview there, spoke to the comms manager at the time. They offered me a paid placement in the end. So I ended up working 2.5 days a week with them as a paid placement, and then they offered me a position when I graduated, so I was quite fortunate there that they offered me a position, and that's kind of how I started in PR. So that first role was very much the sort of down and dirty, calling journalists, writing press releases, doing statements, all of that sort of stuff, with some internal comms as well, so comms to the sort of staff network around changes, what's happening in the business, that sort of stuff. So that's kind of how I started out in PR. I then went on to Boots UK and was a assistant PR manager at Boots and was there for about 18 months. Very, very interesting role. I sort of looked after the PR predominantly for Boots opticians, so did a lot of kind of glasses and campaigns and things like that, and helped them launch their first eye test app. So some really exciting stuff there, as well as working on the pharmacy side and working with a colleague on the launch of the Boots Macmillan Information Pharmacist piece that they did in partnership with Macmillan Cancer Support. So again, some really interesting roles. That was very much pure PR again, as well as some corporate PR activity as well and crisis management. So quite a broad mix. I've always been in-house. I've really enjoyed in-house. I mean, everyone has their preference, I guess, but that's just my sort of career path. I've really enjoyed kind of being an integral part of a business. I guess that's the bit that's appealed to me most, is that you get really invested in the company, and you kind of build contacts internally as well. So as well as the side of PR where you're talking to journalists and you're building kind of those relationships, there's an element of stakeholder management internally. And whilst it has its challenges, don't get me wrong, I do quite enjoy that relationship you have internally when you work in-house as well. And in terms of kind of what supported me as my career has progressed, I'd say there's a few things really that's helped me. I think I've been fortunate enough to have really great line managers. All of them have been female. That's just by chance, I think. But they've been really strong female leaders. And I've been quite fortunate for that. So a lot of them now are kind of directors, and whether that's at Boots, one of them's at Holland and Barrett now as a director of comms. So they've been quite sort of inspiring, strong female leaders in comms, and who's definitely all taught me different things along the way that I've definitely benefited from. From an educational point of view, an academic perspective, I've done my CIPR diploma. I did that quite late in my career actually, but it was one of those things where as my role sort of started to span more marketing channels, I wanted to kind of get back into the grassroots of PR and kind of keep my expertise and my knowledge strong in that area. And so I went back and did my CIPR diploma just to bring some of that theory into practice again and kind of refresh my own understanding and my own knowledge of PR and how things perhaps have changed since I first started out. So that was really helpful for me. I enjoyed that course. It kind of refreshed some of the things that I kind of needed to kind of keep my knowledge in PR strong. And then I also did a leadership course, so leadership courses. And I think as I started to progress in my career, I'm now at sort of a senior management level. That was really helpful just to kind of give me that perspective on leading people. So not just managing people, but actually leading a team. So I had a team of about 7 at one point, and you know, it was really helpful for me just to not just be a good PR practitioner, but also a good leader. So again, I found really helpful. I know not all companies do that, but I think any sort of leadership style course, I think Melissa, you mentioned one that you guys do, any sort of leadership course, I think as you start to progress in your roles and sort of become promoted, I think that's really, really helpful. And I very much benefited from that. And then also being part of the CIPR Midlands Committee was a brilliant experience for me. I mentioned to Rachel at the beginning, I am considering coming back. So yeah, that was really, really great. It was great to sort of network with people locally. I think with the jobs I've had, it's always been sort of London connections. I've always had to go to London for agencies that we've worked with. The current agency we work with is Pegasus there in Brighton. So it was always taking me to London to sort of meet people to do sort of work with other PR practitioners, whereas actually when I joined the committee, it was nice just to be around people locally that you could kind of bounce ideas off, you could learn from. There was people of all different levels as part of the committee, which was really great to have sort of peers as well as people who were sort of more senior in their roles and experience that I could learn from. And just being part of the events and part of the discussions. I think I joined a couple of roundtables in my time, just talking about PR and how PR, I think one of them was around how PR had changed so much, the role of social media when social media became a big thing. So that was all, you know, really great learning for me in my career as well. So I I definitely say get involved in the committee, get involved in CIPR Midlands, and join the events. They were really, really helpful for me. And then I guess my top 5 tips, and this isn't sort of the practical elements, I guess, this is more just in terms of what's helped me progress in my career. I'd say number 1 is don't be afraid to seek stories. I think that's something I learned quite quickly and early on in my career is, you know, don't wait for those interesting stories to come to you. I was very much, particularly working at the hospital, a lot of the consultants and the sort of doctors that we were working with at the hospitals didn't really see what they were doing as anything special. It was just their job. They helped people. They just, you know, they tried to save lives. It was that kind of thing. And I remember once where I went to visit the neonatal unit, and it was just a catch up with one of the consultants there. I got wind that he was working on a new treatment, and I went to speak to him and sort of just said, you know, can you tell me a bit about what you're doing? And it turned out he was working on, or was sort of trialing, a really innovative, first of its kind treatment for babies who had experienced trauma during birth. And it was like an incubator where they would drop the baby's temperature to a point where it stopped development, certain level of development, in order to stop them from becoming ill. I'm not explaining it in the best way, I'm not that clinical, but it was a really revolutionary treatment. And he sort of talked about it as if it was nothing. And I was like, this is amazing. You know, this is great news. We could do some really good stuff with this. And ended up taking it, writing a PR press release, selling it in, and we ended up on Midlands News. And it was just an amazing piece of coverage and a great piece. And it was that kind of tenacity of going, seeking out a story, finding, talking to people, and kind of going out there that really helped. I definitely say don't be afraid to go out there and seek great stories. Second one would be work experience. It paid amazing benefits to me to gain that experience, and also allowed me to see an industry that I hadn't previously considered. Healthcare wasn't my first choice. I kind of wanted to go into the glamorous world of fashion PR. But that work experience really kind of opened my eyes to different industries, and things that I hadn't thought were that interesting actually has been amazingly interesting for me, and I've really enjoyed working in healthcare. So I'd say work experience, if you can, definitely try that. And be flexible is another one. I've had to be flexible in order to gain the opportunities I have. I think I always sort of set it right. It's got to be pure PR and that's it. And when certain opportunities like working in content, taking on social media, etc., came along, I kind of had to be a bit more flexible and a bit more open-minded as to the role of PR and what that role is going to evolve into. And that flexibility has allowed me to try lots of different roles, and I've really enjoyed them all. I think they've all really helped me shape the role of PR in the marketing mix. An example again of that would be around influencers. There was a whole debate internally around whether influencers need to sit as part of social or whether it was part of PR, and the fact that I'd sort of broadened my role to take on both meant that I could keep it within the PR remit, and it works really well. It's similar to the journalist relationship now in terms of how influencers work, and so that was a real benefit, that I was kind of open to broadening my role in order to kind of show the sort of scale of PR and how PR can actually evolve. Another one would be to be collaborative. I think that's definitely one for in-house, and how you work with your internal stakeholders and how you can kind of get buy-in from other departments and other teams, and working with marketing comms. I mean, for me now it's one role and under one remit, but over the years it's sat quite separately, and PR has always been a bit of an afterthought. And I think I've had to work hard on those internal relationships in order to make sure that PR is an integral part of the marketing mix. And so through collaborating with my colleagues, you know, that's really made a difference in terms of how PR is viewed internally in my company. So a bit of a tip there. And then finally, just recognising that PR, I believe, can be commercial. I think there's a sense that PR is just a bit of nice coverage, doesn't really do anything beyond sort of brand building or brand protection. And in actual fact, in my experience anyway, a lot of some of the PR stuff we've done, particularly around product launches and things like that, has actually driven bottom line benefit for the business. And we've seen increase in sales because of PR activity. We've seen uptake in some of our services in pharmacy because of coverage we've gained. And so that's been really important in terms of how I've been able to position PR in my company, and it's been seen as much more of an important marketing channel rather than a bit of an afterthought. So yeah, just to be open to the fact that in some cases, not all, but in some cases, PR can actually be commercial and can help a business bottom line. But yeah, those are kind of my bits of advice, I guess. So yeah, that's it from me. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. I think it's incredible the amount of roles you have, and you're looking pretty young looking still. So you've got so much experience. You've worn it well. Nicole's talked a lot about her experience in-house. I thought what was really interesting about Nicole, having worked with her or known her for a number of years, is how she's moved in a marketing comms context from PR into kind of more classic marketing. And so for me, one of the brilliant things about working in our industry is the diversity of roles, how you can kind of come into this. I started my career in an in-house press office and then moved into agency. I've worked for a charity, and the core skills that you have as a PR practitioner, you know, the ability to influence, to craft an argument, to copyright, they can be deployed in so many different industry sectors and in so many different functions. It's a great set of skills to have. So if you have any questions from Nicole later, particularly in relation to in-house experience, do post them up. But now we're going to hear from Natasha and then Charlotte. Both Natasha and Charlotte, as I mentioned, have got agency experience. So again, I'll hand over to Natasha, who can introduce herself better than I. So thanks for joining us, Natasha, and over to you.
Thanks for having me, Rachel. I hope you all can hear me. I was having a few audio issues earlier, so if anything does happen, I do apologise in advance. But as Rachel mentioned, my name is Natasha Ferguson. I am currently a consultant at FTI Consulting Brussels. So FTI Consulting is a business advisory firm. We are global, and we sit across many different sectors, from forensic science to economic analysis and strategic communications, where I sit. In the Brussels office, which is a melting pot of so many different languages. I sit within the corporate reputation team and also across our global digital team. My day-to-day consists of creating, developing global regional strategies, integrated campaigns, with my expertise really allowing me to work across social media amplification, brand awareness, community engagement. The list goes on, as it does when you are a PR practitioner. Prior to coming over to FTI Consulting, I have been in communications for the past 10 years. So initially, in my earlier career, I started as a journalist. I have a BA in journalism from London South Bank University. So there I did a lot of freelance work across the consumer and not-for-profit sectors. Had a lot of great highlights and memorable moments, which has been very valuable to the journey. And then I think, like about 6 years ago, there was a space within the faith-based industry where there were no publications, online publications being created to kind of share what's happening within the UK faith-based space for millennials. So I then went on and created an online platform that showcased news, updates, music, videos, loads of different content to engage a millennial audience who may not be aware or would just like to connect with more information within that sector. To Be Real magazine was a great success. We had global recognition, small team of us, but we was able to create a lot of impact with our annual readers over the last 6 years. And I think one thing that you learn about the communications ecosystem is that from journalism to stepping into an editorial role, it was actually quite natural, not knowing it back then, that PR was probably going to be my next stop in my journey. So as Melissa had mentioned earlier on, the Taylor Bennett, which is a phenomenal program, I actually was scrolling on my Twitter feed and back in 2018 and saw that they had an application for their flagship program. I applied, I got on, and the 10 weeks sponsored by FTI Consulting, London and Brussels, was a whirlwind, absolutely incredible experience. And that's brought me to where I am today. So across the board, it has been like I would say working for a consultancy or agency, whichever you prefer. It's very fast paced. Over the past two and a half years, I've been working for FTI Brussels. I have been able to work across a variety of different clients spanning all different sectors. So from healthcare to energy to financial services to TMT. It's really allowed me to really kind of take my knowledge and expertise within communications and really spread that across some of the strategic issues or business objectives that clients have asked us to kind of help resolve, mitigate, and kind of also protect when it comes to their reputation, their brand, and how they want to position themselves. So I would say that, you know, for anybody in this discussion today that may be either looking to start a career in PR or if you're looking to kind of either pivot into an area of expertise, one tip that's kind of worked for me is always listening out to what's happening within the company, because having a specific set of skills, which I came in with, because we sit more in a corporate realm, and me having more of a consumer and not-for-profit background, it's really allowed my collaboration with my clients and with my team to really kind of elevate, whether it's strategy, narratives that we're developing, or campaigns that we're looking to create. So always keeping your ear to the ground, finding ways to kind of, you know, kind of push yourself out of what you're used to, really helps strengthen your overall communication skills as a practitioner. I think what I would also say to those looking to come into the industry is keep your finger to the pulse in your area of comfort. And what I mean by that is, when I came in as a digital expert, someone who lives on social media, I'm going to admit it's the way I kind of navigate. But as someone who kind of sits in that space, being able to consume news that impacts my clients, that can inform team members of, you know, new updates or new trends that would help best shape or shift a service that we offer. Me allowing myself to kind of receive that information, whether it's from Instagram or whether it's from Twitter, via, you know, recognized brands and platforms that you consume news from. As we all know, everybody puts news online in different ways. So being able to kind of share your position in what you learn, how you learn it, and why this information is valuable for your team and for your clients is super important. Always be confident and own the way you kind of deliver what you do and how you do it, in a world where, you know, it's easy to kind of become what everybody else looks like from the outside. It's always great to kind of have your own spin on things, because one thing I can say working in FTI is that I've kind of become known for the creative one that thinks outside the box, that doesn't really have a set way of doing things. And I think if you can kind of come in with your USP and hold on to it as you grow and elevate, that will definitely help you as you continue to kind of fine tune where you want to go in your journey as a PR practitioner. And I think lastly, I would say, it sounds a bit cliche, but be yourself and stay true to who you are. As a PR practitioner, we're all going to have different values and different views on how we see the world. And I think something that I have learned is that we are very influential, more than we realize, in how a client or something that you're working on is going to kind of take shape based on your perspective of why you think it should be done this way. So I would say staying true to who you are, your values, making sure you maintain an objective view, but also making sure that there's a balanced voice in the room when it comes to, you know, making sure you're giving clients the best value possible, is something that is definitely worthwhile. So I think for me, just to kind of wrap it up, it has been very fast paced. I do love that the way of working in agency. I think I'd definitely be open to trying what in-house is like. But yeah, in regards to starting your career in PR, keep your finger on the pulse, use your ways of consuming information to give back information, and stay true to who you are when you are supporting your clients and your team in delivering the best value as possible. And I think I'm going to hand it back over to you, Rachel.
All right, I went on mute. It's kind of hard to follow you, Natasha, to be honest. That energy is amazing, and I feel like I need to sign up for the Taylor Bennett Foundation and get whatever you had. But thanks for some amazing thoughts. I know we're running a little bit behind time, but everything that's been said today has been really, really interesting, inspiring. Just finish up now with Charlotte, just whistle stop of her start in PR, and then we'll just have time just for a few questions at the end. If everyone can stay a bit over 3 o'clock, that would be fine. Perhaps the panelists could stay on for another 10 minutes. But it's been really great to hear the thoughts so far. So over to you, Charlotte.
Oh, thank you. I don't know if you can hear, my mic's usually really quiet. But hi everyone, my name's Charlotte and I'm a PR communication and social media executive at spottydog. So I joined back in March, when just a few weeks before lockdown. So it's been crazy few months, if you say the least, but it's been great. So I first started my career in PR because I've always been fascinated how brands and businesses can create meaningful and forward-thinking forms of communication across different narratives and platforms. So obviously I think coming to PR just seemed like a natural fit. So at university, I studied fashion communication and promotion at Nottingham Trent, which focused on the visual and practical communication of brands and how they connected with their consumers, so whether that was with visual media, print or publication. So through my studies, I carried a work experience out at Wardell Communications, which gave me a great insight into PR, what it's like to work in an agency day to day. Obviously, from what everyone said before, work experience as you start out in PR is very important. I think it helps you make those key connections, especially when you graduate. And after university, I became a marketing assistant. And then after a year, the opportunity at spottydog came up, and I literally saw the job and I just couldn't wait to send my application in. I've always wanted to work at spottydog since uni. So when I saw that, I couldn't wait to jump on it. But yeah, so since then, I think the support I've received here at spottydog has been more than valuable than anything I ever learned at university. I think that learning a role within the job and from your colleagues is the best way to gain experience for your career development. So for example, I found listening on how everyone around me communicated with journalists over the phone. I found that really valuable and taught me how to approach different conversations. And I also think working collaboratively with your team helps you grow your confidence. So yeah, I can't wait to get back in the office properly when we can. So I think my top 5 tips for new talent. So don't be afraid to pick up the phone to journalists and create a professional rapport with them. I think it's more about having that relationship with them where you can just pick up the phone and not have to send annoy them all the time with press releases. If you can pick up and just talk to them, that will then help you gain that relationship when you do need the help with things. I also think do your research in the audience and industry you're trying to tap into. This has actually helped me really well with one of our new clients, just knowing all about what you need to know about them, or their audience will help you engage their message. Thirdly, I think follow the news like a hawk, so you never know when something relevant for your client could come into focus and so you could jump on the back of. Fourthly, copywriting grammar is important, especially when you're outreaching to the media and creating social media content. I think especially on social media, it will stick out like a sore thumb. And then actually read the titles you're outreaching to. I think there's no point trying to sell an article, press release, sorry, if you haven't read their past content, it might not be relevant to what they write about before. So yeah, I think that's very important. I think I probably spoke really fast. Take that.
That's perfect. Thanks, Charlotte, especially from a time perspective. You great job there. I don't know if you can pop yourself back on mute because I can hear myself twice. Thanks very much. I think one of the things that's really great about today is the network that CIPR and the Midlands PR community provides. And one of the things our industry is guilty of is sometimes networking and, you know, kind of you know, opening the door to people that you know. But actually what's great about CIPR is those networks are out there and anybody can get involved. So connect with the people that are panelists today on LinkedIn through CIPR, because you know that network is public, it's available, and networking is always a good way to develop your career. It's just we want to make sure those networks are inclusive and not closed or only speaking to a certain audience base. But anyway, we've got time just for a couple of questions, not a lot of time, but I'm going to ask some questions from Noor, because Noor has asked at least 3 questions and she was first person to ask a question. So I'm going to scroll back. Oh gosh, there's been quite a few questions since then. So Nora asked a question to Nicole in relation to the sorts of things you do within B2B communications. I know within the different roles you've had consumer focus, but you must have referenced B2B within your kind of summary. So can you just talk generally about B2B comms and how it differs to the other things that you may have covered?
Yeah, so from a B2B perspective, it's from our industry and what we're looking to do, it's a lot more around thought leadership. There are a lot fewer players in our field of competitors, I guess. So this is focusing on our AAH side of our business, which is more around wholesale and how we support our customers such as independent pharmacy owners, dispensing doctors and hospitals. And so it's a smaller competitor field, I guess. So it's a lot more around how we position AAH as leaders in the market and leaders in our field, and reasons why customers should choose us over one of our other leading competitors. And a lot of it is around trade press. So for us, it's pharmacy press like independent community pharmacists, ICP, chemists and druggists, those kind of trade titles, and how we can gain coverage about either new service launches, benefits for customers, opinions on changes to the industry. So when the government changes tariffs on our wholesale shipping, for example, of goods, how do we want to talk about that? How do we position ourselves as supporting our customers with those changes? And so a lot more around trade press, as well as working with market guys who look after more of the email marketing and some of the kind of more traditional direct mail marketing around how we can make sure there's a streamlined message across all. We're also looking at media training some experts. So again, around that thought leadership piece, how we can put people forward to comment on changes in our industry and things that are affecting our customers on that side of the business. And then social media is the other element that we look after in our team as part of comms. So managing the social media channels, again, making sure we're publishing changes that we're making to our business, whether that's services that we've changed that might affect our customers, whether that's reacting to things that are changing in our industry, that sort of thing. So social media, trade press, and then spokespeople are the main bits that we're focusing on at the moment.
Thanks for that, Nicole. Question from Jamin. Jamin asks, what would be your best advice for career returnees? So what do you guys all think about that? I would kind of say that generally it's not the same advice I would give to people returning into the industry. Perhaps if you have a maternity break or you've had some time out, gone traveling, whatever, it would be the same advice, in my opinion, as people coming into the industry for fresh. We're an industry that moves really, really quickly. So I think the answer to the question is probably about how's the best way to keep learning and developing your skills. So I don't know if you have a view in that, Melissa, given that you support the we're learning of a lot of people coming into the industry, and where you would sign Jamie in for support.
I mean, I would focus on three things. So as you said, it's pretty fast paced and, you know, being updated and moving all the time. So improve your knowledge and insight about the industry, find out, you know, maybe what's different from when you were last in. Professional networks. So again, if you kind of lost touch with people, to start building that network back up, because that's obviously really useful in terms of hearing about opportunities as and when they arise. And then maybe think about the gap, the potential skills gap. So, you know, do you need to do some professional training, or do you need to, you know, have some insight sessions or secure some short-term work or something along those lines, something that's practical. But for me, those would be the three things.
Super, cool. I think from a time perspective, and there's been some questions that we've been answered in the chat box inside as we go, I'll probably wrap it up there, but we've put lots of people's Twitter handles on here and LinkedIn connections and stuff, so do connect with the panelists today. They've all given their time because they want to support what this event was all about, and myself and Amy as CIPR committee members, together with any of the other committee members, we're always accessible to answer any ways we could support people who want to develop their career in PR. I'll probably defer to Amy now. She's done a cracking job as our chair, and I know that she's got a couple of irons in the fire in terms of future events. I don't know if there's anything you want to flag up now, Amy, before we wrap up. Any house notices for CIPR?
Only a couple of quick things. So do keep an eye out on the CIPR Midlands social channels, on the Midlands Group page on the new CIPR website, and via Eventbrite. That's where we list all of our upcoming events. We've got our AGM coming up in October. The date for that will be announced. But in the meantime, if you are interested in finding out what it takes to be involved in the CIPR Midlands Committee, we'd love to have more voices, more experience, more thoughts coming into that process. So do get in touch with me. And it is the AGM for CIPR UK as well, coming up in September. So if you are a member, you should have received communication about that. If not, the information is on the CIPR website. This is your chance to have a say over the president and the president-elect and so on as we go into the coming years, which is more important than ever, I think, with the challenges and the opportunities that the PR industry has faced. So if you have a vote, please use it. Please read widely, work out who's standing, and if you want to get involved, then do have a chat with us. And thank you to everybody who's been part of today's event. It's been fantastic having you with us.
Yeah, thanks everybody, and I hope you can join us next time we do an event. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon, and hopefully we'll all meet in the real world soon. But for now, thanks a lot. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.